This country sits on the most unstable ground any civilization has ever chosen to call home. Earthquakes split it. Tsunamis erase its coastlines. Typhoons bend it sideways every summer. Volcanoes smolder beneath its mountains. It was firebombed nearly flat. 2 of its cities were destroyed by nuclear weapons. And still, it did not collapse, did not simplify, did not harden into something merely functional. It became more refined, more layered, more strange, more itself. That is the paradox no one has fully explained. Japan does not survive destruction the way most civilizations do by enduring. It survives by rebuilding differently each time, as if the breaking itself is part of the design. Temples made to be dismantled and reassembled. Cities planned with impermanence in mind. A culture that turned the crack in the bowl into something more beautiful than the original surface. What follows is not a travel list. It is the evidence of that paradox, 10 places where destruction, patience, beauty, and reinvention exist so close together that the distance between them disappears. Somewhere ahead, Japan will contradict everything you thought you knew about it. When the contradiction hits, tell me which one stopped you. Tokyo has been destroyed so many times, it should have learned to stay small. It did the opposite. The Great Kanto earthquake flattened it in 1923. Firebombing leveled it again in 1945. And both times, instead of rebuilding what was lost, Tokyo rebuilt something else, larger, denser, stranger, more willing to evolve than to preserve. That pattern is still running. The city does not hold still long enough to become a monument to any single version of itself. Neighborhoods shift in character within years. Buildings disappear and return as something unrecognizable. Neon replaces wood, replaces glass, replaces neon again. And yet Tokyo is not chaos. That is the misunderstanding. Beneath the noise is an order so precise it becomes invisible trains arriving to the second, rituals embedded in convenience stores, silence maintained in crowds dense enough to fill stadiums. The city did not abandon discipline when it abandoned permanence. It transferred discipline into motion, rhythm, and daily repetition instead of stone. That is what makes Tokyo essential to this story. It is not the Japan that preserved the old world. It is the Japan that discovered you could lose everything, repeatedly, and still build something so intricate that the loss itself becomes invisible. Then Japan shows you what it looks like when it chooses not to rebuild, but to remain. Kyoto was deliberately spared from bombing during the war. That decision changed everything. While the rest of the country was forced into reinvention, Kyoto was allowed to keep its older shape: temples, gardens, wooden streets, tea houses, shrine gates, standing exactly where centuries of hands placed them. The result is not a museum. It is a living argument that preservation is its own form of power. Walk through Arashiyama's bamboo or stand inside Kinkakuji's reflection, and something shifts beneath the surface of this trip. Because until now, the story has been about destruction and what comes after. Kyoto reverses it. Here, the question is not what survives the breaking, but what happens to a place that was never broken at all. And the answer is unsettling in its beauty. It becomes so still that time itself seems to slow around it, as if the city generates its own gravity. Kyoto is not the opposite of Tokyo. It is the other half of the same sentence. One city proves Japan can lose everything and rebuild. The other proves it can hold something so carefully that even centuries cannot wear it down. There is no preparation for this. Not because the history is unfamiliar. Everyone knows what happened here on August 6th, 1945. The facts have been repeated so many times, they risk becoming abstract. A date, a weapon, a number. Hiroshima does not allow that abstraction. The city insists, quietly and without anger, that you stand in the specific place where the worst thing human technology ever produced met an ordinary morning. The atomic bomb dome still stands at the hypocenter, skeletal and untouched. The Peace Memorial Park does not shout. The museum does not dramatize. Everything here is calibrated to do one thing: make destruction feel precise instead of theoretical. And then you step outside into a living city. Trams running, rivers flowing, children crossing bridges built over water that once carried ash. That is Hiroshima's real force. Not the memorial. The fact that the memorial sits inside a functioning, gentle, forward-facing city that chose peace as its identity rather than grief. Japan did not hide this wound. It did not avenge it. It placed it at the center of a public space and built life around it, as if healing and remembering could, somehow, occupy the same ground. Now step back far enough to see the whole country at once, and one shape dominates everything. Fuji is not just a mountain. It is the single most reproduced natural image in Japanese history, painted, printed, photographed, referenced, stylized, and worshipped so many times that the real thing almost feels like a copy of itself. Hokusai made it iconic. Shinto made it sacred. Tourism made it accessible. And still, on a clear morning, when the cone appears above clouds or coastline with that impossible symmetry, it silences everything around it. But Fuji is also a volcano. Active, monitored, capable. And that duality runs through everything Japan is. The most beautiful symbol in the country is also one of the most dangerous. The mountain people paint on scrolls and print on currency could, without much warning, remind everyone that the ground here was never stable and the beauty was never guaranteed. Japan does not separate those truths. It holds them together: danger and grace, impermanence and reverence, threat and worship in the same frame, the same image, the same mountain. Fuji is not beautiful, despite being a volcano. It is beautiful because the culture that claimed it never pretended the danger was not there. After cities, temples, memorials, and icons, something older than all of them, older than Japan itself. Yakushima is a small island south of Kyushu, and it feels like entering a different age of the earth. Moss covers everything: stone, bark, root, path. Ancient cedar trees rise through mist, so thick the forest floor seems to breathe on its own. Some of these trees are thousands of years old, standing since before Kyoto was a capital, before any temple was built, before the culture that would become Japan had fully taken shape. This is not scenery, it is scale. Because Japan is so often defined by human craft, precision, design, discipline, refinement, that it is easy to forget the islands themselves are wild. Yakushima corrects that. Here, nature is not arranged. It is not pruned, raked, or framed by a garden wall. It simply exists at a density and age that makes human presence feel recent and thin. And that matters to the story. A country shaped by destruction and renewal is also a country shaped by something it never controlled: forests that predate every earthquake, every empire, every reconstruction. Japan did not only build beautifully on unstable ground, it built beside wilderness old enough to make all its cities look like yesterday. Enough reverence. Osaka does not do reverence. If Tokyo is discipline, wearing the mask of chaos, Osaka is appetite, refusing to wear any mask at all. This city is loud where Kyoto is quiet, direct where Tokyo is coded, and hungry in a way that turns food from culture into identity. Dotonbori glows at night with signs larger than buildings. Street vendors do not whisper. Conversations do not circle politely toward a point, they arrive at it immediately, laughing. And that changes the rhythm of this film completely. Because Japan is so often presented as a country of restraint of silence, ceremony, minimalism, and discipline, that the world forgets it is also a country of noise, comedy, excess, and unapologetic pleasure. Osaka is where that other Japan lives, openly and without apology. This is not a flaw in the image. It is the missing half. A country that only knew how to be quiet would not have survived what Japan has survived. Endurance requires energy, not just patience. Osaka is that energy, the part of the culture that does not bow first, that eats standing up, that laughs before it thinks, and that reminds you Japan was never one mood. It was always at least two, running side by side. After the noise, the mountain. After appetite, devotion. Koyasan sits high in the forests of Wakayama Prefecture, a monastery complex founded 12 centuries ago and still active, still inhabited, still asking the same questions it asked at the beginning. Monks walk beneath cedar trees at dawn. Incense moves through wooden halls. Okunoin Cemetery stretches into the forest, its stone markers disappearing into moss and mist like memory slowly returning to the earth. This is the Japan that exists beneath the surface of every other version. Not the Japan of technology, speed, or spectacle. Not the Japan of food or fashion. The Japan of inwardness, where silence is not the absence of noise, but a practice refined across centuries into something almost physical, where death is not hidden, but walked beside, literally along a forest path lined with 200,000 graves. Koyasan does not photograph the way Kyoto does. It does not stun the way Fuji does. But without it, the rest of this film would be incomplete. Because Japan's ability to rebuild after destruction was never only mechanical, it was spiritual, rooted in a relationship with impermanence, so deep it became not grief, but architecture. Then, at the northern edge, Japan becomes a country you have never seen before. Hokkaido does not look like the rest of Japan. It does not feel like it either. Wide plains replace dense cities. Volcanic lakes sit in craters, rimmed with birch. Winters bury everything in snow so deep that entire towns seem to vanish beneath white silence. In summer, lavender fields stretch toward mountains, with a scale that feels closer to Scandinavia than to Honshu. This is the correction the story needs before it ends. Because Japan is so often compressed into a single visual language shrine, gates, neon, cherry blossoms, bullet trains, that the country's sheer geographic range disappears. Hokkaido breaks that compression. Here, nature is not delicate. It is vast, cold, volcanic, and largely empty. The bears are real. The winters are severe. The land does not arrange itself for human admiration. And yet, it is still Japan. That is the point. A country this layered cannot be captured by its most famous images alone. Hokkaido proves that Japan extends past every frame the world has placed around it into cold, silence, open space, and a wildness that the South rarely admits exists. "10 places," and the simple version did not survive a single one. The postcard offered cherry blossoms. The country offered earthquakes, renewal, silence, appetite, wilderness, ash, devotion, and the strangest relationship with impermanence any civilization has ever built. A city destroyed twice that became the most intricate metropolis on Earth. A city spared from bombing that turned stillness into power. A city erased by a single weapon that chose peace over grief. A volcano worshipped precisely because it could destroy. Forests older than the culture itself. A city that laughed when the rest of the country bowed. Monasteries where death was walked beside, not hidden from. An island so wild it made the rest of the country look like a garden. That is Japan. Not a country of discipline alone. Not a country of tradition alone. A country that broke repeatedly on the most unstable ground civilization ever chose, and each time, instead of merely surviving, it rebuilt something more refined, more layered, and more contradictory than what came before. The breaking was never the enemy. It was the method. So, which contradiction stopped you?